So let us begin. Let's all take a couple minutes and think about a story that your grandmother told you, or that your dad told you when you were sitting outside, enjoying a nice evening, or some joke that your friends tell, something that you heard, something that you remember from maybe your childhood. Maybe you couldn't sleep one day, and your mom said, let me tell you a little story. Let's all just take 2 minutes and try to think of something like that. Or anything. It could be anything, really. It doesn't even have to be a story. It could be a saying. It could be a joke. It could be a riddle. It could be a whatever. So take just 2 minutes. Think quietly. See what you guys come up with. Because this will influence how we, or how I am kind of thinking about this idea of what is folk? What does it mean? It's such a weird, huge word that everything gets tossed into. So think about all of that. Think about some story. Not something, fundamentally not something that you read. Although we will be doing a reading today, and we'll discuss how reading plays into all this, but something that you heard from another human being. Just think. I'm also thinking. This is very loud. Anybody think of anything? Aditya.
I remember the story that my grandmother used to tell me.
Yeah.
She used to tell these episodes from Mahabharata.
Okay, perfect. Tell me.
So
Tell us.
One of my favorite ones was the defeat of Bakasur at the hands of Bhim.
Yes.
So, I don't remember the exact contents of the story, but then Bhim has to go and claim the land that is occupied by this Asura. So he has to be fed. So he goes in a vehicle, filling it with lots of food, and then he goes in front of this demon, sits in front of him, shows his back, completes the meal, and then irritates the demon, and then he finishes off the demon.
Right.
This is the story. But the exciting part was how my grandmother narrated it.
Right.
So that's the story that I remember.
And over. Now, interestingly, okay, good, perfect. Anybody else want to add something else? Yes, madam. Reddy, yes. You have to press and hold it there.
Okay, so I remember my grandfather narrating episodes of the Ramayana every night.
Okay.
And so my favorite one was when Meghnad is defeated.
When who?
When Meghnad in the is defeated.
Okay.
I specifically remember one fact that, one thing that he told me was that Lakshman was actually the father-in-law of Meghnad. So I remember being really surprised at
You were
this.
shocked by this.
Yeah, and also the mode of narration that he took, he used to sing bhajans and songs in between related to the scene that happened, and just generally a lot of songs, not necessarily bhajans which are really popular today or are sung usually in our house, but very different in the form of stories.
Okay.
Stories in the form of bhajans.
Okay, perfect. So there was singing involved. There was other elements of narration coming in different ways. Okay? Anybody else? This is already developing a certain theme that I'm heavily concerned with in this talk. Yes.
My mother used to tell me the story of Ganesh and Kartikeya.
Okay. Which
about
one?
their competition.
Yeah. What happened?
To tell about the importance of mother and father.
What is it?
To tell importance of parents.
Exactly. So tell the story. It's a nice story. Many of you might know this story. So
there was competition between Ganesh and Kartikeyan.
Yeah.
That who will first
circle the earth.
Around the world.
Yes.
So Kartikeya, I actually don't remember well now. he used peacock for
This is-
traveling around the world, and Ganesha just take only 3 rounds around his parents. So
Okay,
that's how that's how it tells us the importance of parents.
good. Now, this also brings up another, you kind of forgot the story. You have a memory of this thing, right? You have some conception, the Ganesh hai, Kartikeya hai, some race is there, parents are supposed to be honored, right? But you don't remember the details. Many times you don't remember those details. Many times, now you're not telling like a young, maybe your son or daughter, when you have them, you might tell these stories, and then you're not going to say, "Oh, re, bhul gaya katha," right? You're gonna make something up, you're gonna fill it in, you're gonna tell it your way, right? And this is another critical point. Everything gets told in a new way, everything gets changed, everything morphs over time. More stories. Something beyond stories. All this folk stuff is embedded in, like I was saying, jokes, riddles, puzzles, sayings, quotations, proverbs. Huh? Kumbhakarna. So anybody want to add something else? Please. To play with the child and maybe to do something else also? Put them to sleep. To make them eat. And maybe when they get a little bit older, you tell stories. Why? Exactly. Didactic purpose. Right? To teach some values, to teach some moral, to teach something. This is your mom, dad told you because they want you to respect mom, dad. Yes?
So
this is what I'm getting at. I haven't heard any nonsense yet. I haven't heard any dirty jokes yet. This is folk, man. Ambrish is getting excited now. Huh? All sorts of memories are coming to his mind.
Particularly one memory from my engineering. We had a friend who was very weird. So it was actually a bad word to say that you are that particular guy's friend.
Okay.
So if you have to hurl and abuse, you can say that you are his friend. So I couldn't literally, so this incident happened just before my exams. I couldn't write the exams. I barely managed to pass. And I couldn't sleep the next day as well, thinking that I was this guy's friend.
Right.
Yeah, and still even after 8 years, we still exchange that joke.
Right. So this brings up another point. This story, if you told this story or you called whatever that word is or this guy's friend's name, for me it means nothing. For all of us it means nothing. But for your community that you were in, it had great significance, right? So there's a certain kind of boundedness in that kind of a story. You had something?
Yeah, when I was small, my mom used to tell me the story of the small boy who used to lie every time. When, the story was like the small boy used to scream that, oh, the tiger came, the tiger came. So one day when the tiger really came, nobody actually turned up.
Yeah.
And the tiger came and ate him.
Right.
My mom used to say, "Ki never lie."
Right.
So
That's the boy who cried wolf in the Western world. And you might have another big theme is you find the same story in all different places. Now, whether or not we can trace those to a particular source or not is up to question. Although you'll kind of hear, and there's a lot of research on this, I won't get into all of that, of the movement of stories. This is a very important thing. Okay, good. So a lot of good, important, critical themes of the talk are coming up. Anybody else? Some Portuguese folk stories? What did you?
The one with the wolf.
You know the one with the wolf?
Yeah, because my name is the same name of the story in the film. So it's Peter.
Oh yeah, Peter. Yeah.
And I was inventing a lot when I was younger. So
Good. Anyone else? Okay. So barring this story, and barring Ambarish's very unique story about his friend, everyone kind of told these Puranic, epic stories, right? So what I want to try to distinguish, and this will go back to our original kind of bifurcation thing that we had, is that on one hand you have a formal classical, or an idea, let us say, of a formal classical thing, something written down, something that is permanent and fixed. But even your Bakasura story is not what I remember from the Mahabharata, if I had to say. Right? There was a whole context to that story. This Bakasura likes to eat people. Right? And there's that whole family that's there. They come to Kunti. They say, "Arey yaar, this this demon needs food. We need to offer up somebody from our family." So she steps in and says, "You can send my kid instead. You know, he'll take care of business for you." So
that is the story, but it's due to my memory that I couldn't.
So this is a big theme, forgetting. Forgetting is a huge theme in all of these stories. And you'll find this motif of knowledge being lost and then again retrieved. This happens again in all storytelling. Yes, you might forget some detail, you add another little detail of your own, whatever it may be. This is how they move, this is how they transform, and this is how they have some kind of enduring power. And, yes? Yeah, so that's another big theme. So let's go back and think about this. If I put classical over here, let us say. Now, even these are all simply constructs, but they're constructs that will help us, and we will break them down. For example, let's go back and think about, if I write here, what do you say here? Right. See, you're also good. If I write here vernacular, you write here? Yeah, at least in our Indian context. If I write here Pan-Indic, what would you write here? Local, regional, right? Okay. What other kinds of dichotomies can we think of? Okay? So this sacred you put where? Yeah. Let us say, these are also tricky words. That's not really the point of the exercise. What else?
The sacred and the profane are there in both the...
Of course, everything is there in the place. In fact, I want to have this list so I can break down every single one and show how I could switch off this classical and folk, I could flip it like that and make a very solid argument for that also. But let's keep going so we know what other issues we're dealing with. I'll give you another one. If I look at this as some kind of fixed, maybe we'll say this is mutable, something like that. Anything else? What other things come to mind?
Patronage.
Patronage. I didn't think about that. That's interesting. Okay. That would be on this side, right? Naturally. I mean, intuitively. So what goes on this side then? Okay. What else? What? What is it? Popular. I don't know. It's a question for me what goes here. What did you say? Popular and? Pedestrian. So pedestrian things don't have patronage, don't get patronage? If you look at all these performance traditions, we're going to look at a nice video with a lot of stuff. They have patrons. Some village state comes and says, okay, for whatever, you know, Navaratri, we're going to hire a troupe of Brhat Katha artists to come and sing, and they pay them, and they do their work. It doesn't matter. This is a good enough list for now. So returning to that thing that I was talking about last time, this double helix-y kind of thing, as Michelle nicely pointed out, it is the DNA of India, arguably the DNA of humanity in many ways, because all of these things really you can find in multiple cultures. Maybe not so much in some cultures that don't have this heavy amount of rarefied classical thought being produced. Theoretical texts. You might not have some civilizations that have that. You might have civilizations that only work within what we might think of as the folk thing. But for at least for India, for much of Western civilization, we could put this thing. What I want to think about is something that falls like over here. And to me, when so many people say Mahabharata story, Ramayana story, Purana story, Ganesha, that to me is that line in the middle. Because it has recourse to that classical written fixity, whatever, that was given to us in a more Samskrita, as in a perfected and refined form, but they totally exist outside of that realm. And they really live outside of that realm, right? So Ambarish's story, to me, falls much more outside of that thing, right? Or I was thinking, just a saying. Like when I was thinking about this, I remember one person telling me, I learned the least from my teachers. I learned a decent amount from my colleagues, but I learned the most from my students. So hopefully we'll do that today too. That I want to learn, and we're not here as Guru Shishyas, we're all just here having a discussion. I'm the facilitator of that thing, that's it. So, if we're looking to find examples of this kind of cut, something that will help us look at both sides of the coin simultaneously and complicate all of these issues. I mean, let's just take one of them. Pan-Indic. Is everywhere in India, has it been influenced by this Sanskritic written world?
I think that pan-Indic comes from, the feel, if I were to put it, to recognize that this is a story that I have heard in my region too. So if there are two versions of the story, but then the contents of the story are the same, but someone in Kerala or Tamil Nadu and someone in Assam or someone in Gujarat says that, yeah, this is a story that was part of my childhood.
Right.
That means pan-Indic.
Right. That means pan-Indic. Now what I'm saying is every place that you find in India going to have that story? Is the spread of that thing going to go every single place?
Could be.
Could be. But most likely not. There are communities that don't have recourse to these kinds of things. Right? So I could break that down to some level. I could tell a story from some tribal area where there's no Rama, there's no Krishna, there's no anybody, there's no Arjuna, nobody. They have a whole other set of stories. Yes? You wanted to add something?
But then they may not have these stories as part of their tradition, but they do have a knowledge about these stories, and they modify it accordingly. So
no, I'm getting even beyond that. Beyond even modified stories. They have a whole different worldview that might not even correlate to this. At the same time, like you were saying, if we think of folk stories as just regional, it's like you said. There are folk stories that you find in all parts of India that didn't come from one Sanskrit court, but actually traveled on their own. By people telling here, people telling there. So what we might think of as just a regional, a simple Telugu story, might be found in Maharashtra, might be found in Bengal, in its own formation. So what I'm just trying to get at is a lot of these things can be broken down. But they're here for us simply because we want to break them down, simply because we want to see how they interact and relate with each other. Okay. Any question up till now? Nothing too interesting. So, as I was saying, yeah.
what is the difference between a story, myth, and a legend?
Big question. I don't know. How do we decide? Let me give you now a definition of folklore. Okay? This is from Ramanujan, again, one of my kind of heroes, and worked a lot on Indian folk stories, went around collecting them, listening to people. I mean, this is a great project you can do. Just go talk to people outside and say, like I asked you guys, what was the story that your grandma told you in the evening? You might find a variety of answers. You might not find anything from Mahabharata Ramayana. Although, yes, when I also thought about it, I thought of all sorts of those types of stories. I mean, that's what my parents knew. They told. I also thought of some other funny stories, like what we might think of are more folky. Like they don't have these mythical characters. That's another one. That's another big thing. This classical has that kind of cosmos, the heavens, right? It's like alaukika. That's what we call it in Sanskrit. Whereas the folk stuff is very, to use a simple word, earthy. It's like connected to the ground. It has issues of, day-to-dayness. So I thought of a couple of stories there. There was one story about a Raja and a Rani, and a lot of these stories, they have those beginning words, Once upon a time. In your language, you might have it, something, in Telugu, it's anaganaga. So anaganaga means some time ago, it was like this. You might find it in your own regional languages. Anyone have something like that you can think of? No? Yes?
We have Marwari stories, which we usually recite. It's a part of festivals, the small festivals that we have. So most of them have a story dedicated to each festival, which are supposed to be recited to everyone. And most of them are related to Raja and Ranis.
Yeah.
And it starts like this, कि बहुत समय पहले इस देश में ये राजा रहता था.
Yeah. So a long time ago, in this place, this is what happened. And so it's very connected to that local feeling, that this was the place, maybe not the exact time, but it happened here. It didn't happen up in heaven, in Swargaloka somewhere, right? That's why the epics are so well found in these things, because they're that connection between these realms, really. I mean, they also happened here. We have the places, we have Ayodhya, we have Kurukshetra, we have these physical realities of day-to-day life, or the geography of the place, even though they have gods and all these mythical kind of magical things going on. So here's the definition. A folk tale is a poetic text that carries some of its cultural context within it. Let me repeat. A folk tale is a poetic text that carries some of its cultural context within it. Second point, it is also a traveling metaphor that finds new meaning with each new telling. Okay? So one, it has its cultural context built into it, and it travels and gives new meaning each time. Now, when I read that, I was like, why doesn't the Mahabharata count as a folktale then? Does it? According to that definition, you say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Good. I agree with you. But there's something here, and I think we'll get, when we go through a little bit, I think there's something here that he's getting at about this, carries its cultural context with it. There's this term that they use in folklore studies, autotelic. That means it's like self-contained, its purpose, its existence, or its meaning, in a certain sense, is self-contained within that story. You don't need to know about who Indra is, or who this guy is, or who Rama's dad is. I mean, it's all right there. Self-contained. And it's that self-containingness, I think, that also makes these things have the ability to travel quite easily across time and space. At the same time, everything I'm saying applies to the Mahabharata. Within its framework, it's also self-contained and also has the ease, as we have seen throughout all of history, to travel not only throughout India, but all around the world. So I think there's something there. I'm also looking for it to find out exactly what he's trying to get at here. So hopefully we'll maybe move towards that as we move along. Okay, one other important thing I want to think about when we look at this dichotomy is there's a certain differentiation in terms of how time is understood in a village as opposed to like a city or some kind of civilized place. Or, let me put it, in the classical reckoning of how time works. If you look at what the Puranas say, right? How does time work? What system do we have? Yeah, yuga system, right? Which is what? Cyclical. But it's something else. There's another quality about the yugas that is important to remember. It's not just a circle. I would say it is more of like a spiral. Now, why am I saying that? What? I didn't. There are, but why couldn't it be a circle then? It just the yugas go on. Yes.
Exactly.
Right. So what are those differences? Why is the Kali Yuga different from Treta Yuga?
There is a distinction based on how you attain salvation in each yuga.
Okay.
Yes. So it depends. It changes from one yuga to other yuga.
So what?
From sacrifice to bhakti to yajna.
Okay, but even a larger idea. You're saying that there's some kind of progression. It's not totally cyclical. It doesn't repeat back exactly, right? One yuga is different from the other because dharma is actually going down. That's the traditional story. You know, the cow, great cow with 4 legs, you know, standing strong. We're now in an age where there's poor cow only has 1 leg left. That is why I think of this classical time as more of a, and then it'll again go like, you know, so there's some kind of deterioration of something. There's some kind of evolutionary aspect to it. Whereas the folk sense of time is much more standardly cyclical because it's connected to the basic cycles of our life, like the seasons, when we should plant, when we should do this, what happens next year. Nothing's really deteriorating per se in at least the general folk conception of how time works. And you'll find this in many cases. One good example, we were talking about it the other day, is this idea of karma. When I was a kid, if I did something bad, you know, or was naughty, my mom would, na karma. Right? So when she said that, she's not saying my karma like my actions which are going to lead to a beneficial future life, or my actions that led to this situation now because of a purva janma. She meant, this is my fate. This is my situation. This is my lot. It was not related to anything future or after. So sometimes in those reckonings of how karma is understood, it just means your lot, your situation, what's happening right now in the present time. It doesn't have that recourse to some kind of past life or future life or, you know, progression of good karmas that will lead to something else. It's much more of a present, right now kind of idea. So that's like just a little kind of idea of how these concepts even change as they, you know, evolve and as they spread, you know, into different parts of society. I mean, karma is, as you know, quite a heavy philosophical idea. Go to the Bhagavad Gita, you go to all sorts of places and people write about it. So that's just one example of how things change in the conception of time in terms of these things. So that's just another point to think about. Now, this idea, this dichotomy, is not something that, you know, people just came up with one day. I mean, post facto. This was part of how at least the theoretical texts of India also viewed things in many ways. Right? And I discussed these two terms the other day. What were they? Very quickly, I mentioned them. Anybody? Folk and classical, the kind of two polarities we learn about? Nobody? That's right. Very good. So you have marga and desi. So marga means the path, the way, the right way, the prescribed way, the written way, the theoretical way, all of that stuff. Like the proper kind of conduct of how to go. Formalized. Desi, on the other hand, somewhat represents the opposite of that. It's amorphous, you're not sure, it changes from place to place, everyone has their own situation, it doesn't really work, who knows, not sure, regional, not formalized, organic, if you want to put it that way, right? Now, I'll give you some interesting terms from linguistics, which I think are quite relevant to this point about why I was bringing this up and this middle line. So can I erase this stuff? At least you all have this in your mind. Okay. So this is an idea that I was thinking about, I mean, when we're talking about these dichotomies and how we break things down, I came upon thinking about it in terms of how languages were also theorized in India, at least to a certain extent. Particularly in the later period when we had the development of regional languages, vernacular languages, and when vernacular languages also then started to have not only their existence as a language that was spoken, but as a language that had the capacity and the power to be expressive as a literary language. So they had to, you had to create grammars now for Telugu and Maharashtrian, all these, or Marathi, and all these other languages. You needed that kind of formalization. So that formalization was coming in. And before that happened, you had this idea of, well, the backdrop of all this, we had this belief that Sanskrit was the mother of all language, right? That every language you had this beautiful Sanskrit thing, and little vulgates, little de-evolutions of this language regionally led to the regional languages that we have today. That is problematic in many ways. Even the development of Sanskrit, I would say, was a bottom-up process. The way I look at it, Sanskrit was something that came about because we had these languages and it was formalized with a grammar. And it was then encased and said, okay, this is the language that we call Sanskrit today. Something that complex doesn't just pop into existence. Doesn't even make sense. But that is still how we kind of think of it, because we used to think Sanskrit is the, Devavani, language of the gods that was perfect and made. Shiva gave the Shiva Sutras. Panini defined it. Pakka, done, perfect. That's what Sanskrit means, perfect. Right? So, when they started looking at these regional languages, these theorists also said, oh yeah, I see how Sanskrit is there all the time. Sometimes, like Telugu is a good language for this. Kannada is also the more, not so much Tamil because you don't have as many examples, but in Telugu it's a lot easier. Because sometimes you can listen to a Telugu speaker and you could understand almost everything they're saying because they use so much Telugu in day-to-day life. In fact, my argument would be that there's more Sanskrit in Telugu than there is in Hindi. It's true, actually. It's true. In a day-to-day life, I mean, the example I always give is, how do you say, Hindi speaker, how do you say book? Kitab. Exactly, right? And the Telugu guy will say pustakam. The Tamil guy will say puttaham. But the Tamil guy, if he wants to be real Tamil, will say what? Nool is the correct answer. Nool is the correct answer. Right? So let's look at these things. For example, if a word comes exactly into the language as it was in Sanskrit, there's a word that we have. Anyone know what how these words interact and how the theoreticians, the old grammarians used to think about this stuff? So if a word came out like pustakam, pretty much standard in Telugu, that would be considered a?
Tatsam, tadbhav.
Yeah, actually this should be a T. Tatsama. So it's exactly the same. Comes down the way it is. Pustak, pustakaha, pustakam, okay. Little bit change. There's another one. What does the tadbhava do? Same word, same meaning, but some morphological changes happen in it. So puttaham might be one example in Tamil, let us say. It changes a little. But you can clearly see how it's connected to that thing, right? So these basically are, you could say, Sanskrit or Sanskrit-like. Anyone know what the next category here is that the people define? It's a word that we've already actually talked about. Kind of moving down close. If I use a word like nool, How would they classify that? That's a word particular to that region, particular to that language, and it was called Desha. It was regional, it was specific, it was locally driven. It was not top-down driven, it came from the soil. Later times, they even came up with another set over here, Anya Desha. What does that mean?
Other.
Some other place. So this is when we get Persian words coming in that became prevalent in all parts of India. So these were also non-Sanskritic, non-local, but still used in localities. Take that, that's just a side point. These fall into one category, and there's one more. This got added a little later. Gramya. Now, what does Gramya mean? Huh? Yes. From the very bottom. From the most earthy. And the difference that you get between these two is that these three could be literary. So you could use these words in literary stuff, but if you started using Gramya words, it's not nice. They don't like that. They don't want you to do that. So like in Telugu, let me think of something. So, okay, Annam. Annam means? Rice. In Telugu, it basically means food. If you want to say khalya, you say annam tinava. Have you eaten your annam? Means your food. Now, the village people don't say that. They say kudu. Or they use another word, bhuva. Bhuva is a beautiful word. Bhuva has a meaning of like a little kid eats bhuva. Bhuva is like what your mom feeds you, right? There's a certain feeling about those words that you were all smiling when I said that. You understand that. But that wasn't acceptable for literary purposes. So this is how these guys distinguish all this stuff. Why am I talking about this? Why I'm talking about this is because I want to try to understand how these things also map onto this world. How all of these things can also apply to folk elements. That's how I've been thinking about it. So when you tell me that your mom tells you a story of Arjuna and, Kichaka and all this stuff, to me, that's like in this zone. Maybe it's a tatsama if you heard it exactly like you heard it in the Mahabharata, pakka. Maybe the story that Aditya told us might be a tadbhava because he added some other little touch of his, but basically we know it's a Mahabharata story. Now, you told this boy who cried wolf. That may be from your region, maybe from somewhere else. Maybe that falls into Desha. It doesn't have some big Puranic metaphor or story behind it, right? Or maybe you know some foreign stories. Maybe this is an Anya Desha story, possibly, right? Then you have these Gramya stories, which is more like Ambarish's story. So I tried to think of things of the folk in this way, and to really say that the folk does not apply just to, the village story. The village is there, but that big Sanskrit worldview is also there. So does this kind of make sense? I'm also working out my ideas on this, so I'm just throwing out things to consider. Yes? Yeah.
With a lot of, meaning, philosophy, but at a story level, it can still go forward.
Right.
Just as a story.
Right.
So, it lends itself to folk. At the same time, it can be taken for deep philosophical insights and things
Absolutely.
like that.
So that's why I gave the example of the karma. See, it's come down to mean something else. It functions in its own way in certain contexts, and yet it has that, high philosophical background behind it. So that is exactly the point. What you're saying is what I'm really trying to get at, is that we cannot really distinguish all of this classical and folk very clearly. It's a very, very gray zone. And to what we decide to say is folk or not folk is very difficult to say. But at the same time, there's a texture. There's something you can feel. I mean, when you smiled when I said buwa, that means that you felt something, that you could feel, that there was something immediate about that word, something deep and personal about that word. You know, that's something special. So I'm with you 100%. It's tricky to say. And then again, certain stories are easier to move and travel. Like you don't hear about, I don't know, you don't hear, for example, some big story, let me think. I don't know. You don't hear about, like, Bhartahari, let us say, wrote a lot of heavy linguistic philosophy. Vakyapadiya. Does that come down to us? Do grandmothers tell these stories about grammar and philosophy? No. They somehow don't lend themselves to that. Maybe there is even narrative involved in it. But it's that narrative quality is the thing that can really move things along, that can make it travel. And that was the other critical part of the definition, the ability to travel, to move.
Maybe it's also the story itself, because, you know, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, they
They're-
traveled.
They're narratives.
So because the literary figures in them traveled, it seems to travel all over India. I mean,
Yeah.
like, I think the Rama notched up the highest traveler miles that anybody, did. Because wherever you go in India, Ram has come there, and he's traveled through that forest. And,
You're right.
It's north, south, east, west, you get the same thing.
Yeah. But then
It's
that
in
also has to
Mahabharata.
do with localities grafting themselves onto these larger narratives, which is another process that happens a lot. Everybody has a Chitrakuta in their area
Yes.
where Ram and Sita came and bathed. Wherever they may have been, every area has a place like that, right? Or everybody wants to imbue that locality with these greater themes. At the same time, I still argue that there's plenty of stuff that doesn't do that. If you really go to the villages, I mean, I remember going to this small temple. Okay, on one side was a big Hanuman. So some guys were hanging out there. Many of the people that came to visit that temple were just doing their puja to Hanuman and leaving. And then I saw over here, there was some big, like, rock-like thing that had a little hole in it. And there were these ladies, cutting chickens, pouring blood, and, I was like, what's going on here? So then I went and I was like asking, they were telling some stories about the local deity here and, how we have to, propitiate her and make her okay. And then I came back and my uncle was like, don't go near there. That's a very powerful place and powerful goddess. You don't want to be messing with those kinds of, local goddesses. They're very powerful. And there was nothing related to Ramayana there. There's nothing related to Mahabharata. There wasn't even a connection with the Hanuman that was there, except they're all happening in the same place, in the same little area. And that's how these things are all intertwining and interweaving, and it's very difficult to separate it all out. But still, there is some survival, and I still believe that if we really do go and do these kinds of ethnographic things, we'll find those stories that don't connect to we'll find those Gramya stories. And where you really find those Gramya stories in all these jokes that you hear, or your little, something, those dirty things that maybe we don't always talk about, that's where all this like real culture of real life is. Maybe it's also in the Ramayana and Mahabharata too, but I don't know. So, one place, what are we on time here? Okay. One place that many of these stories found their first expression, at least in terms of when we read them, are the Jatakas. Very old collection of stories, animal stories, about the Buddha's life. And this brings up another very important factor in all storytelling, is this idea of frames. How do you put an organizational structure around a bunch of stuff? So in the Jatakas, it's all about all the future lives of the Buddha. That's basically the frame. And you have certain recurring characters that come. Brahmadatta is always born over here in Benares, and you have a bunch of stories about him. But really, what was the core of why did we have these Jatakas? Why did they really arise? What was the purpose? They have that niti element to them. They have that moral story element to them. They were used for didactic purposes, to tell people a story. Very easy to digest, learning about the monkey and the crocodile or whatever the story was. But you get a little story out of that. That just reminded me of a story my mom used to tell me, which I think might have some seed. Pardon the pun, you'll see why I said that. You know, I remember once she told me a story that's, someone had died, and I was young. I mean, I didn't understand exactly what was going on. And she told me the story that once a woman came to the Buddha and said, see, everybody already knows the story. You know, my son has died. I don't know what to do. You must do something. I'm lost. This is completely unfair. This is an injustice has happened. And what did he say? Yeah, mustard seed was what I heard. He said, I understand. You do this one thing and then come back to me. He said, go to every village here and see if someone doesn't have a mustard seed in their house. And we all use these mustard seeds all day. So she goes to all these women and she says, do you have mustard? Yes, I have mustard seeds. Yes. So she came back finally to Buddha and said, everybody has mustard seeds. I mean, I don't know why you're asking me to do this. He said, well, just like that, everybody has death in their family. It's part of life. It is part of everyone's consciousness. You're no different from anyone else. You have.
Your version is different from ours.
Good. That's how I heard it from my mom. So what did your version say?
So she was asked to bring those seeds from a household which had not had a death.
Yeah. So she couldn't find. So same result. Perfect example of how some base story is told and retold. The core of it is fundamentally the same. That death is everywhere. This story was told about how death is part of life. Okay. I don't know if that comes into Jataka or not, actually. And whether or not it does or does not is the stuff that scholars sit and do and figure out, write down all these things. We're not worried about that right now. Or even when you told that story, I'm not going to go and check you against the critical edition of the Mahabharata and say, no, this is not Bakasura's story. I don't care. The critical edition of the Mahabharata is also a fiction in and of itself. There was no such thing as a critical edition. We didn't even have that concept. So Jatakas. What's one famous story we find from the Jataka you might know? Shibi Chakravarti. You know this story? Shibi. No. Tell the story and then see, maybe you know it for a different king. Anyone know the story? Who knows the story? The dove and the eagle, or who knows how I heard it? And anyone want to tell it? Should I tell it? Good.
So Shivi was a king. He was a very generous king.
Yes.
And Indra decided to test his generosity. And then he came to Shivi in various forms and started asking for his kingdom, for his riches, for his wealth. And finally, when he didn't have anything to give, Indra asked for his thigh bone, if I'm not mistaken.
So see, he's saying no. He's saying, no, this is not the story. This is incorrect. It's not exactly how it goes. But it's your version that you're telling us today. So what happened? See, your story sounds more like Harishchandra now to me.
I felt so. Okay.
Which is also a theme that you get.
Yes, because the only memory which I recollect of the Shivi story is that he ends up giving his thigh bone. I don't know.
Yeah. Go ahead. Good. You're making my point for me. I don't even need to do anything. Good.
Actually, they come in the form of birds.
Yeah.
Eagle is behind that.
Dove.
Dove, and that Raja gave his thigh, part of his thigh, so that he can fulfill his. The bird fulfill his. Means he will not hungry anymore. So.
Okay. Michelle, you want to tell it?
As I remember it.
Yeah.
is that the dove lands on Shibi's
Yes.
lap, and then the eagle follows shortly, And the king says, this dove has come and sought my protection, so you can't have it. And the eagle says, but this is my natural food. You have no right to deny it to me.
Correct.
So the king says, well, I'll give you something equivalent. You know, I can give you so many other birds. I can give you lots of meat. I can give you lots of... You won't go hungry. He says, no, no, I want this food because I was hunting for it. You can't deny it to me. So the conversation goes on for some time, and ultimately the eagle yields on condition that the replacement is from Shibi's own body. That meat alone will do, otherwise nothing else. So Shibi actually starts then cutting, out of his own thigh, and then of course the birds take their true appearance, and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. So, and there's variations on this. The one I heard was, he says, yes, I'll give you a pound of flesh equal to the dove. Finally he says, okay. So he cuts it off, puts on a scale with the dove, and it doesn't weigh up. And so he keeps giving flesh. And finally he says, okay, I'm putting my whole body on this thing. And then he says, okay, you're ready to sacrifice your life. This is a classic story of Dehadana. Very important Buddhist idea. And a lot of times you find that all of these kinds of motif stories get attributed to Buddhists. Why we call them that, I don't know. Maybe because we first heard of the story in these Jatakas. But this story spread all over and finds all different kinds. Harishchandra, for example, is another variation on this theme. You know, Harishchandra at the end of his life has to sacrifice his own son, fundamentally. Right? And what does that story remind you of? Abraham. Yeah. So there's a lot of these motifs that spread, and that was actually the work when folklore became like an actual object of study, like in the 50s. Before, people were not interested in this stuff. People wanted to know about classical texts. People wanted to know about great literature. People, why do you want to collect stories from villagers, man? What's the point of that? People didn't really get it. People actually still don't really get it. We're not even doing enough of that. There is a wealth of stories out there that we are forgetting, that we don't respect the way we, I hope, would. Because those, like the definition was saying, they encode some very deep cultural ideas. And it's those cultural ideas that are being lost when we lose those stories. Okay. Now, a couple other things. So, Jatakas was one. Panchatantra was another one. You've probably all heard Panchatantra stories. Hitopadesha, another one. I'll read you one story. I just copied one down because, I should tell a story. And a lot of times when these stories are told, for example, the Purana Vachanakaras, a lot of times they used to keep the book with them. Maybe the guy is not reading the book, but the book and the written thing had a certain kind of symbolism, that there was something that was being told from a beautiful book. And of course, they would add all of their variation, explanation, commentary on top of that. But having that there was also an important part of many types of storytelling, that there is a respect given to that holy written word, if you want. Okay, the other big one is the Brhat Katha. Now, the story of this thing perfectly fits that middle line in the double helix. For me, in many ways, the Brhat Katha is fundamentally the representation of how this Sanskritic world was able to put a frame around the idea of these folk stories. Its name itself means the great story, right? And you know the story about the story? The meta story? I'll read you, I brought a story to read, a couple of them, about stories. You get a lot of interesting stories about stories. But let me tell you the one about the Brhat Katha. So one day, Shiva and Parvati are sitting in Kailasa, happily blissful, and Parvati says, I want to hear a good story. Tell me a good story. I want to hear a story that nobody's ever heard before. Like a really good, really unique story. So Shiva says, okay, no problem. I'll tell you. So he starts telling this big cycle of stories, 7 princes, big story cycles. You get story cycles also, right? So he's telling this whole story. Unbeknownst to him and her, one of his guards, kind of saw that something was going on, and he slipped in through a little, peephole or something, and basically he heard all the stories. So then, what does he do? He goes and tells his wife. He says, listen, I have this great story. You've never heard this story. You won't believe what I heard. Let me tell you this story. So he tells this huge story. And then what does she do? She happens to be, she doesn't know the context of how the story was told, and she happens to be one of the attendants of Parvati. So when she's saying, hey, what happened today? How's everything? And she's like, yeah, everything's good. I heard this amazing story. So she starts telling the story. Then Parvati's like, what? My attendant knows this story that Lord Shiva told me was the unknown story that was beautiful? What is going on here? So she goes to Shiva, very angry. What are you doing, boss? You said? You have to have humor in these stories, too. She says, what's going on? And he said, honey, I didn't know anything. I honestly told this is a new story. And then they find out, oh, this guy was listening, and so these guys get cursed. So this guy gets cursed. Yes? So, yeah, I was going to say, that would be a really interesting story. Valmiki, yeah, it's possible. And what's the real point here? The point of that is, even though it's the Brhat Katha, the story of like stories, the story of the land, the story of people, fundamentally, these guys want to put a frame that basically everything is originating from Kailasa. So even Valmiki had to get this story from over there in this version. Right? It's a way of like framing things. It's a way of contextualizing the things, at least in those worldviews. So this guy gets cursed, this attendant guy. And the only way he can get out of this curse and return to Kailasa is if, she says, you have to make this story known to the whole world. This story has to spread far and wide. And he's, of course, a little, annoyed and pissed off. Anyway, he goes, he lives somewhere, he gets sent down, he lives somewhere in the Vindhyas. This is the classic dividing line of North and South India. And there's actually some really good research. I want to write a paper on this one day because I have an idea about what's going to happen. So anyway, he comes down. He has all sorts of adventures. Finally, he becomes the court poet, or one of many court poets, it's Shatavahana king. Okay. Has anyone heard this? No? Okay. So this is a funny story. So one day, so he's sitting around with his other scholar friends. Lots of adventures have happened in between. And then one day, the king is out with his queens. And they're having some fun, very hot summer day, Jalakrida. You know Jalakrida? Love having splashing fun, this thing, that thing. So king is out there with his wives. And so he's splashing water on his wife. And then she says, Modakair. Modakair, and I just wrote down the word, because it's a funny word. Paritadaya. Modakair paritadaya. Paritadaya means splashing. Or, offering or giving, right? So then the king said, oh, queen is asking for modak. She's hungry. Great. So he calls his attendant and says, come. Bring some modaks, bring some sweets for my beautiful queen. And all these guys come rushing in with all these sweets. And she's sitting there just laughing. Why is she laughing? She says, you king, you're an idiot, man. You don't even know the most basic Sandhi rules of Sanskrit. I didn't ask for modakair, don't hit me with these, or give me these modakas. It is ma udakair. Don't hit me with water. So don't splash me. That's what I was saying. And you're an idiot because you don't even know the basic rules. And the king was like, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. So he goes back to his court and he says, I have all these pundits here. Who's going to teach me Sanskrit? So this Gunadhyaya, who's the guy that's been cursed, he says, okay, boss, it's not easy, man. It's going to take a really long time for you to get good at this. And there's another guy, I forget what his name is. There's another scholar that says, no. 6 months, ho jayega. Crash course. So then this Gunadhyaya says, you're talking bakwas, boss. If you can teach the king Sanskrit in 6 months, I will never speak Sanskrit. I will never speak Prakrit. I won't speak even any regional language. No language that a human speaks. I will give up all this language. So what happens? This other guy goes and does some pujas to Kartikeya. This is also an interesting grammatical exercise that's going on. And Kartikeya gives him something called the Katantra, which is a different kind of grammar. It is a simplified grammar. It is not Paninian grammar. It's a different type of grammar. Simplified, essentialized. So this guy gets this Katantra grammar. He goes back to the king, teaches him, puck. He knows Sanskrit. He's wonderful. They test him. He passes with flying colors. This Gunadhyaya is like, oh my God, impossible. But he said, you made a vow, you made a promise that you have to now leave. So he says, namaste, I am leaving. He gives up Sanskrit. He gives up Prakrit. He gives up regional languages. He doesn't know what to do. He starts roaming around. He's depressed. One day he comes across this guy, Kanabhuti. This guy's a pisacha. You've heard of these pisachas? Pisachas are like one of the many non-human characters, like ghoulish guy, kind of not a very savory character, you know. And he speaks this language, Paisachi. The language of the pisachas is Paisachi. So this guy is telling this story, and then he's like, oh my God, this is the story. I need to learn this story, and if I can learn this story and then tell everyone else, I'll be free of my curse. So he sits with this guy, learns the whole story in this language, writes it down, decides to write it down, but he doesn't have any ink. What does he do? So it's like a Rakshasa language, you know? Yeah, he uses his blood. He writes it all down. Brings it back to the king. Said, king, look at what I've written. The king's like, chi-chi! Some demon language written in blood. Get this junk out of my house. So Gunadhyaya gets sad. He goes back to the forest. He starts burning them one by one. And he's reading it, and then he burns them. As he's reading, all the animals in the forest gather around. Everyone is enchanted by all these stories inside of this text. But sadly, he's burning it one by one, going on, going on. Nobody cares. There's no way that I'm ever going to be relieved from this curse. Then the king's men come and, oh no, the king says, you know, we've been having these feasts, but I'm not getting much meat. It's all vegetarian food these days. What's going on, people? So the king's men go out and they find that all the animals have gathered in this one place to listen to this amazing story. So they go back to the king and say, actually, there's this guy telling some crazy story in some weird language, and he's burning up this text. Nobody knows what's going on, but all the animals are completely spellbound by this thing, and that's why we can't get anyone to, you know, we can't do any hunting. So the king says, okay, stop. I think I know who this guy is. And if the animals like it so much, maybe I should listen to some of this story too. So he calls him back to the court. He says, okay, sorry. Tell me the story. So he starts telling one of the stories. He's amazed. Like, wonderful story. So this is another example of that loss of a text and some kind of retrieval. So actually only one of these books out of the 7 original ones actually gets written down. It's written down in this Paisachi language. That's the Brhat Katha. Eventually it spreads and moves everywhere, so he gets relieved of his curse. That's the basic frame narrative of this whole Brhat Katha, which contains all sorts of stories about non-god creatures. He's actually, the main character is a Vidyadhara. They're kind of a semi-celestial being. Another example of how it falls into that middle category. It's not a god, it's not a human. It's some kind of character that lives in antariksha, in the atmosphere level, right? So even as a metaphor, the whole thing, to me, is like a perfect example of how the folk is being classicalized or put into a framework to work within that narrative world. So, Brhat Katha, Hitopadesha, Jataka tales, all of these things, many of the stories have spread all around the world. I mean, Aesop's fables, some people say came from India. Some Grimm's fairy tales that you're getting, some may have come from India. We don't know. Very hard to track these things. Whether or not they were individual inventions of the time or not sure. The reason I told this particular story is because I really think it's, you know, a perfect example of that middle thing, right? That how we can kind of harmonize both of these worlds. And when you read the stories in Brhat Katha, I encourage you to do it. Arshia Sattar, here, I think I even have it. I might have it. Did a translation of small sections of it. Actually, so this is not the Brhat Katha, by the way. Sorry, that's another. Yeah, this is another part. So this Brhat Katha is, it gets known, but it's gone. And it's in a Paisachi language. Now, what is this Paisachi language? Some people think it might have been some Dravidian languages. Some people think that, no, it was just some kind of corrupted type of Prakrit. I've done some research, and I need to do a little bit more, but I actually think that Paisachi was the way the Dravidian speakers might have spoken a Prakrit language, like the weird dialectic intonation of a non-native speaker of that language speaking in this other language. So this story doesn't come down to us. It comes down later. This one's the Katha Sarat Sagara, Somadeva, written in Kashmir, much later. And he also tells this whole big story cycle. And it evolves in different ways. There's a couple of different recensions of this text. But anyway, if you read it, you read some of the stories, they're not about the gods. They're about princes and, Brahmins that do bad things and ascetics that do great things and all sorts of very drunkards, a lot of drinking going on in these stories. All that stuff. It's a really fun story text. And, I encourage you to kind of check it out. But again, it has been molded into that classical frame. It's a written text. It's something that we have. It's not that kind of organic world. So a couple more things, and then I want to play this video, which is going to take 25 minutes, but it'll be great because I wanted to balance all of this with the performative side. I mean, that's really how this stuff is transmitted. People are not sitting and reading those texts. I'll read you a couple of stories, but fundamentally it is performance. And even your grandma telling you a story at night, that's a type of performance. That immediacy, that oral nature, that improvisatory quality, all of those things. So when we watch this video, try to think about where these different traditions fall on this kind of a, spectrum. Okay. So this movement of these stories, I'll read out one story from the Hitopadesha. Very famous. You might know it. It's all about swadharma. You do your own duty and don't worry about anyone else's. Okay? Once upon a time, there lived a washerman in a village. He had kept a donkey and a dog to serve as his pets. The dog used to guard his master's house and escort him wherever he went. The donkey used to carry stacks of clothes on his back to and fro the river. Both of them slept in the washerman's courtyard. Like this, they were leading their life under the kind shelter of the washerman. Anyone hear this one, the dog and the donkey? Yeah. On one unfortunate night, when everyone was sleeping, a thief managed to get into the house. Even after seeing the thief, the dog didn't bark. When the donkey saw the thief entering the house, he asked the dog, "Dear friend, didn't you see that thief had entered the house? Why don't you bark and wake our master?" The dog answered, "Mind your own business. Don't talk to me about my duties. I know how to guard my master. I've been guarding this house for a very, very long time. But master doesn't care about me. From the past few days, he doesn't even feed me properly. He doesn't even know my worth. I won't wake him up. When this thief steals all his valuables from this house, then maybe he'll realize and recognize my importance." The donkey irritatingly said, "You fool! This is not the time to complain. This is the time for action. Be fast and do something. Wake up the master." The dog replied angrily, "No. As he does not care for me, then I won't care for him." The donkey shouted, "Oh, wicked creature, you are full of ingratitude towards your master. You are ignoring your duty, and when you are ignoring your duty when you are required most. Fine, I'll do your duty and wake him up." Then the donkey brayed at the top of his voice, which made the washerman wake up. The thief heard this too and quickly ran away. The washerman got up, looked all around, and he could find no one. He got furious at the donkey, who had disturbed his peaceful sleep. The washerman thrashed the poor donkey with a stick. The donkey was left in pain for weeks. The moral of the story, Do your own duty and don't worry about others. So little things like this. I mean, I remember translating this in first-year Sanskrit class. You know, great. Very easy to understand, very easy to follow. And this is how people would kind of explain things, you know, teach people things, teach children things, right? So all of these stories, at some fundamental level, if not directly didactic, at some level are encoding the values of, you know, the storyteller to the person who's listening to them. All right. Let's go to the video so we can talk about the video too. So what I was trying to do the other day is I said, okay, let me collect some videos of different performances of stories. I was kind of looking around, I found this video, really nice. They've kind of put things together, so let's all watch it together. Please take notes. Please make points. Think about these divisions. See where things fall on that spectrum, and we can talk about it after we finish watching. This is all on YouTube. You can watch it. Oh, here we go. It's already there.
When I hear somebody saying, once upon a time, I wish to tell you a story. It happened like this.
The pleasure of sitting down with a group of people in front of a fire or in front of a feast and telling epic.
It's our urge to make sense of our existence and our lives.
Stories are very important for cultures.
People want story. We're fundamentally narrative creatures.
I think that we are formed by stories.
Stories to engage us, entertain us, stimulate our imagination.
Stories are a way of looking at life.
Provides sense, provides consolation, it provides continuity.
It reifies life as lived. It tries to reconcile us to life as lived. It tries to point out the wonder of life as lived. And it makes us look beyond ourselves.
India has always had, stories being told, or rather retold in different ways, mainly through performances. And if you look at our music or dance, in fact, many of them do have either direct narrations of stories or at least suggestions of stories or certain contexts in our epics. So I think our whole tradition of art and literature is linked to the telling of stories and the ways the stories are told.
There has been a great performing tradition which covers the whole range of the cultural geography of this country. For instance, Pandavani, which are stories of the Mahabharata, but the way they are presented, and it is full of comments on contemporary events and what is happening in contemporary life and social and political and economic issues.
I think somebody like Tejan Bai is, to me, an ideal storyteller. She makes that connection through her energy, and she brings to life these myriad characters. She's the man, and she's masculine, and she's evil, and she's good, and she's benign, and everything in seconds she's transforming, and you believe it because she's so real.
और पैदल वाले पैदल तैयारी करो, रथ वाले रथ तैयार करो, आगे आगे सेना, मोर चले मोर पीछे सब सेना। भाव और भंगिमा में डूबना, जब तक आप नहीं डूबोगे तो दूसरों को क्या डुबाओगे? आप नहीं हंसोगे तो दूसरों को क्या हंसाओगे? आप नहीं रोगे तो दूसरों को क्या रुलाओगे? तो जिस तरीका पात्र आते हैं उसी प्रकार हम उनके अंदर में ढल जाते हैं। मरे रथले सजा दे कहे मामा, कहे ना मानी जाना। अरे ठीक बागडोर, कुरुक्षेत्र मैदान में खड़ा कर दी। चारों तरफ नजर लगा के देख के कर नदानी कथे। अरे चिल्ला के बोले अर्जुन कहाँ हो?
The storyteller was the custodian both of the history of the community,
the narratives of the community, the rituals of the community, as well as the community's worldview within a larger scenario.
भीष्म पितामह गुरु द्रोणा के हाथ से बच गए, पर आज मोर हाथ से बचना मुश्किल हो रहा है। काल अर्जुन तोड़ ले बाण और लगा गांडी धनुष में तान, दोनों के निशाना एक समान रहे, मंत्र बहन करके जब बाण छोड़ा तब जल्दी।
The way in which stories are told always assumes a listener. It's never a monologue. It's essentially interactive. It's essentially communicative. It's a conversation. So we have the tradition of the listener or the listener figure saying ha and then
नीचे दबो छलांग मार छाती में बैठ के उठा पूजा जय जगदम्बे ला प्रणाम जय जगदम्बे ला प्रणाम.
You have Pandun ke Kade in Rajasthan, which again is really chronicles of Pandavas. And these are Muslim singers. And these Muslim singers are really community singers. You will have any number of such performing art traditions in the country which really keep on, in a manner of speaking, rejuvenating the mythological repertoire, enriching it, adding something to it, changing it to the changing needs.
The antiquity of our tradition is not as remarkable as its continuity. And so we are living these things today.
ಯಕ್ಷಗಾನ 1600 ವರ್ಷಗಳ ದಾಖಲೆಗಳಿದ್ದಂಥ ಒಂದು ಜಾನಪದ ಕಲೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿಸ್ಕೊಂಡಿದೆ. ಆಮೇಲೆ ಶಿವರಾಮ ಕಾರಂತರ ನಂತರ ಇದು ಜಾನಪದ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಇದು ಶಾಸ್ತ್ರೀಯ ಕಲೆಗೆ ಸಂಬಂಧಪಟ್ಟಂಥ ಹಲವಾರು ವಿನ್ಯಾಸಗಳುಂಟು, ಹಸ್ತಾಭಿನಯಗಳುಂಟು, ವಾಚಿಕಾಭಿನಯಗಳುಂಟು ಮತ್ತು ನೃತ್ಯದ ಪ್ರಕಾರಗಳ ಅನೇಕ ಉಂಟು. ನಮ್ಮ ಯಕ್ಷಗಾನದಲ್ಲೂ ಅಷ್ಟೇ ನೃತ್ಯ ಪ್ರಕಾರಗಳುಂಟು. ಇದು ಜಾನಪದ ಆಗ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಹೋಗಿ ಬಾಯಿಂದ ಬಾಯಿಗೆ ಬರ್ತಾ ಉಂಟು. ಆಮೇಲೆ ಕೃತಿಗಳಾಯಿತು. ಸಾಮಾನ್ಯ ನಾವು ಆಡುವಂಥ ಕೃತಿ ಮಹಾಭಾರತ, ರಾಮಾಯಣ, ಭಾಗವತ, ದೇವಿ ಪುರಾಣ, ಇದನ್ನು ನಾವು ಯಕ್ಷಗಾನ ರಂಗದಲ್ಲಿ ಅಳವಡಿಸ್ತೇವೆ. ದೇವತೆಗಳನ್ನಾಗಲಿ ದೇವರನ್ನಾಗಲಿ ನಾವು ರಂಗಸ್ಥಳದಲ್ಲಿ ಆಯಾ ಆಕಾರಗಳ ಮೂಲಕ ಜನಕ್ಕೆ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗುವ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಪ್ರಕಟಪಡಿಸ್ತೇವೆ. ಆಮೇಲೆ ವಾಚಿಕಾಭಿನಯ, ಮಾತಿನ ಮೂಲಕವಾಗಿ ನಾವು ಜನರಿಗೆ ಮನದಟ್ಟು ಮಾಡಿಸ್ತೇವೆ. ಇನ್ನು ಹಸ್ತಾಭಿನಯಗಳ ಮೂಲಕವೂ ನಾವು ತಿಳಿಸ್ತೇವೆ. ಹೀಗೆ ಒಂದಲ್ಲ ಎರಡಲ್ಲ 5 ವಿಧದಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಯಕ್ಷಗಾನವನ್ನು, ಆ ಕಥಾಭಾಗವನ್ನು ಜನಕ್ಕೆ ನಾವು ಕೊಡ್ತೇವೆ.
Epics bring together a whole range of human experiences and emotions, predicaments, paradoxes, ironies, all in a very accessible and compelling form.
ದೇವಿ ಪುರಾಣದ ಕಥೆ ಇದು.
ನೀವು ಒಪ್ಪಿಕೊಂಡ್ರೆ ಈಗಲೇ ಕೆಲಸ ಆರಂಭ, ಇಲ್ಲದೇ ಇದ್ರೆ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ವಿಳಂಬ.
ಈ ದೇವಿ ಮಹಾತ್ಮೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ನಾನು ವಿಷ್ಣುವಿನ ಪಾತ್ರವನ್ನು ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೇನೆ. ಆ ನೀರುಗೊಬ್ಬರಗಳನ್ನ ಪಾಲನೆ ಮಾಡುವಂತಹ ನಾನು ಪೂರೈಕೆ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು.
ಪಟ್ಟಭುಜದಿಂದ ಆಯ ಆಕಾರಗೊಂಡು ಶಿವನನ್ನೇರಿ ದೇವಿ ಬರ್ತಾಳೆ, ಮಹಿಷಾಸುರನನ್ನು ಕೊಲ್ತಾಳೆ.
For us, mythology is not something dead, not something that belongs to the past. It is something that surrounds us wherever you go.
സ്വാമിയായിരിക്കുന്ന കംസനെ നിഗ്രഹിക്കാനായി കൊണ്ടുവന്നിരിക്കുന്ന ഇവന്റെ ശരീരത്തിന് വജ്രം പോലുള്ള ശക്തിയുണ്ട്, ഉറപ്പുണ്ട്. എന്നാലും മുഷ്ടികളെ കൊണ്ട് ഞങ്ങൾ ഇവനെ ഇടിച്ചിടിച്ച് നിഗ്രഹിക്കും എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞിട്ട് രൗദ്രത്തോടുകൂടി നിൽക്കുന്നു.
Koth was especially a way of popularizing mythological stories by narrating the Sanskrit text and then interpreting them in Malayalam, so that the common audience also gets to know what is in an original Sanskrit text.
ശ്രീകൃഷ്ണചരിതം നങ്ങ്യാരമ്മക്കൂത്ത് കുലശേഖരവർമ്മന്റെ സുഭദ്രാധനജയം എന്ന നാടകത്തിലെ 2ാം അംഗത്തിലെ വിഷ്കംഭത്തിൽ കൽപ്പലതിക എന്ന് പറയുന്ന ചേടിയുടെ നിർവഹണമായിട്ടാണ് അവതരിപ്പിക്കപ്പെടുന്നത്. ആട്ടപ്രകാരങ്ങൾ എപ്പോഴും പഠിച്ചിട്ട് അത് മറക്കണം എന്ന് ഉദ്ദേശിക്കുന്നത് അത് വിട്ടിട്ട് കഥാപാത്രങ്ങളായിട്ട് മാറാനുള്ള മാനസിക തയ്യാറെടുപ്പ് വളരെ മുമ്പേ തന്നെ നടത്തണം. അപ്പോൾ നമുക്ക് കഥാപാത്രങ്ങളായിട്ട് മാറിയിട്ട് അനുഭവിക്കാൻ സാധിക്കും എന്ന് പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് ഉഷാ നങ്ങ്യാർ എപ്പോഴും എന്നെ ക്ലാസ് എടുക്കുമ്പോൾ പറയാറുണ്ട്.
How do people sort of consume wisdom from such a layered sort of narrative?
See, in the Indian context, most traditions of storytelling relate to a particular community. It is around these local communities and local customs and local tribes and local practices, as well as local ecology, that a lot of these local storytelling traditions evolved.
श्री रामचंद्र भगवान री कावड़ है देखो सुंडाला सुख बंजना सदान बाली बे सारा पहली सिमरिये गमरी रा पुत्र गणेश। ये मंदिर है, बांटने से पहले हम अगरबत्ती जलाते हैं और इनकी जो आरती बोलते हैं, उनके बाद में हम जो दानी देवी देवता का नाम बांटते हैं.
Religion begins as stories, and our rituals enact those stories. Our dogmas, our beliefs, are abstractions of those stories. But at the base of it, is a story. Let me tell you, da-da-da.
ये सुतार बनाते हैं और हम राव लोग हैं जो हम कवि हैं, हम बांटते हैं, इसकी कहानियाँ सुनाते हैं, जो भागवत गीता भी पढ़ते हैं, जो भी कोई भी कहानी आती तो पुरानी वो भी सुनाते हैं.
I don't know how it starts, how a mythical story starts, but it goes on growing along with time. And as long as it is relevant to the emotional, cultural, intellectual life of a society, it lives on.
सुंडाला सुख बंजना सदान बाड़ी बे सारा पहली सिमरिये गमरी पुत्र गणे कबीरा तेरी झोंपड़ी गलगटिया के पास करे लाभो भरेला तू क्यों भयो उदास. राम और लक्ष्मण सौ ने मृगेरो शिकार करने गया, 5 दीव रिक्शा करे ब्रह्मा विष्णु महेश. राम जी कावड़ है देखू 17 पांडु है राजा पिंडरा पुत्र 5 गलता पांडु हरा बियो जा पापनी कड़ूकार में कोई धावे नहीं आवे जो जाए. पीकीस पोतारो दादो मान के जमारिया लोटो पानी नहीं पायो खावने खीरा ओढ़ने डीरा मिलिया. सतरी कावड़ है देखो बड़ी सिंह जीरो ना बचे है राजा बड़ी हो 2.5 पाउंडा जमीन. विक्रम सिंह जीरो ना बचे है बीकानेर दरबार. सतरी कावड़ है भगवान री बीकाजीरा दर्शन बचे है. श्री कृष्ण सुने सामने जिया ने नावरी और भगवान रामचंद्र जी के नाम की सीता मैया के नाम की जय.
All the original stories, and I think everywhere, are about gods and the mysterious and the transcendent and so on and so forth.
जो 5 पांडु लिखा हुआ है, ये माता कुंती का दर्शन है, ये भेर बाटिका है, मीरा और राणो जी है, ये मोर जज राजा है और अकी बड़रा पान में भगवान बासो लियो हरिचंद्र राजा है, कृष्ण भगवान है.
the magic, the universality, the connection that you find from stories that connects our hearts to one another with these invisible threads. I tell stories to wake up stories in other people, because every living being has got a story to tell.
The true spiritual aspects, it cannot be explained with words, and it is mostly to experience in the body through the sadhana. But when you put it in a poetic form or you want to tell it to others, then you need to have images, and the best way to touch another heart is through simple stories. Bauls are mostly the poets, the traveling poets who is searching for the spiritual fulfillment or the ananda through songs, dance and music, poetry, stories. দেখে শাহজাদা চুপি থাকিয়া গাছের আড়ায়, তখন বেটি বলে আরে আন্দারুত জাদু ভীষণ কালো, দেখিয়া শাহজাদা লাগিল ভালো. We tell these stories and we try to touch that moment. So in this way, Baul is a storyteller. My reason of making picture as part of the Baul storytelling is very simple, because I had people to listen to me who didn't know Bengali. So I was looking for a language which can easily relate to them. So I started painting the images of the poetry. So this is a tradition, creation and continuation. If you look at it, is not the region of the people who are listening to your song. It is the like-minded people all over the world. People have traveled from one place to the other. So the stories also have traveled. So it became part of everyone. As a Baul, we say that the song must become our body. We must realize it in our body, and then only we can give, because otherwise it will not touch you. You see the ektara is there, and it's giving you a continuous note of the bass. Depending on that bass, you go high, you go low, that is the sthai. The inner connection is this transformation of the soul. But it goes high and low with all the drama and separation, fighting and what is happening now and everything. This inner chord is this bhakti, this unconditional love. This is the base of the story.
If you stay true to the stories of your people, there's something that's going to connect with others wherever you go. It doesn't matter what part of the world you go to, because you are true to that indigenous, that original, that joyous, that magical, that is yours, only yours, and share it with others, and you think, we are more alike than we are different.
We need to talk also about how the same material is told in 50 different ways. So whether it's the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, or the folk tales, they are numerous. There is no official version. And they will live as long as somebody comes along and retells them.
There is Kathakali, which is, of course, it is one can say it is a kind of mime, but then there is the song in the background which narrates the story, which is acted out following very much the instructions of Bharata in the Natya Shastra.
Kathakali got evolved around half of the 17th century as a full dance theatre to tell the story of Mahabharata and Ramayana. And when that art form became very popular, these Antipandarans, they used to hide and watch the Kathakali performances every day. And they went to the wood carvers to make puppets of Kathakali for them.
If you look at the Kathakali costume, a lot of it has been taken from the existing folk forms. The way the characters dress, the way the face is made up.
This is one character from the story of Dakshayaga of Kathakali and Bhadrakali. And you see that we followed exactly how the Kathakali costume is.
And if you listen also to the Kathakali songs sung from behind, you will find it's a form of music called sopana, which is a particular classical Keralite form of music. But in sopana music also, you will find certain overtones or rather undertones of ancient folk music.
The basic technique is the 3 fingers. That is the technique. And we are 4 puppeteers, 1 drummer, 1 singer, and 1 stage assistant. We all will be sitting on the ground. We use a small tarashila exactly like how the Kathakali tarashila is. And we create exact illusion of Kathakali in a short time. On Dakshayagam, in the live Kathakali performance, it takes maybe 4 hours or 5 hours. We finish the story in 45 minutes.
The performers have to undergo certain kinds of rituals. It seems to come with the art, and I don't think at that point it is difficult to isolate the ritual from the artist's own life and performance.
Every epic, when it is performed through a puppetry or a dance form, people will look at it, they will think about it, and they will understand it better because it's directly entering them. And Pav Kathakali is also one of that example, how the small stories are taken into this globe puppetry, which Kathakali also is performing.
If you look at the Indian cultural map, you have storytelling in performing arts, you have storytelling in literature, you have also storytelling in pictures.
ఈ కలంకారి కూడా జానపద కళ. భారతీయ సంస్కృతి సాంప్రదాయం అంటే మన కళలు అనేటివి చాలా గొప్పగా ఉండేది. ఈ కలంకారిని కూడా దైవంగా భావించి పురాతన పద్ధతులు మన ఆలయ కళ సాంప్రదాయ కళను ఇచ్చేసుకునేసి చేయడంలో ఈ కలంకారి పుట్టింది.
In India, everything is religious. A religion is a kind of a way of life, which varies from region to region. So obviously there is a kind of a sanctity to everything that you do, and there is a sacred element to it.
చిత్రకారుడు కృష్ణునిలు రాయి ముందు వినాయకుడిని ప్రార్థించుట. కంసుడు అంటే రాజులు పిలిపించి దేవకి వసుదేవులు వివాహం గురించి మాట్లాడుట. కంసుడు దేవకిని సంహరించబోగా వసుదేవుడు మన్నించమని కోరుట.
ఈ కలంకార్లో మొట్టమొదటి నుంచి రామాయణము, భారతము, భాగవతము, విష్ణు పురాణము ఇలాంటి పురాణాలే వస్తుండేది. ఇప్పుడు రామాయణంలో ఇక్కడ పరశురాముడు వచ్చేసి నువ్వు ఈ రామలక్ష్మణుల్ని అరణ్యవాసానికి పంపమని చెప్తాడు.
These stories are in our DNA, they resonate with us.
విశ్వామిత్రుడు గంగా నది ప్రవాహం గురించి రామలక్ష్మణునికి వివరిస్తాడు.
People have a sense of truth and reality and identification with these stories and with the characters in them.
కైకేయి వచ్చి వెనక చాటుగా వినడం జరుగుతుంది. ఆ విషయాన్ని తీసుకొచ్చి ఇక్కడ కైకేయికి చెప్తుంది.
They teach us, they entertain us.
శ్రీరామచంద్రుడు ఇలా ప్రశాంతంగా అయోధ్యలో పట్టాభిషిక్తుడై ఉండడము ఈ క్లాత్ యొక్క ముఖ్య సన్నివేశం.
They make our life what we are. They are us.
A singular story will not do justice either to the human diversity of existence nor of the plurality of human imagination.
When I hear somebody saying, once upon a time, I wish to tell you a story. It's like somebody's announcing that lunch is ready, come and eat. And we gather around. I get excited, I get ready to be nourished. My mouth is watering and I'm hearing another story. And I am so blessed and lucky to be in that place where I can hear someone saying, once upon a time, I'm going to tell you a story.
I hope we can all really go and document these things. There's so much that is really in one or two generations, maybe one year. We're really at the very end of a whole type of existence. And maybe we cannot save those things from oblivion, but let us at least document them so that the future generations will know about them and we can tell stories about when we went to make those documentaries or whatever. I mean, I think it's a nice thing to do. Okay, so did you see how things were fitting on this scheme? I mean, almost all of them were Mahabharata. Somebody was talking about Arjuna and, the battle. Who was the one that was not talking about that? There was one that was not a Mahabharata or Ramayana or Puranic anything. No. That's like hardcore. The Baal singers. They come from already that tantric side of things, which was a little bit, overtly somewhat, wanting to invert, divert, whatever you want to say, the mainstream classical mode, if you want to put it very simply. And she's drawing on some other local stories. So, for the most part, you've heard a lot of this stuff. But has anyone been to any of these kinds of performances? Heard like Brhat Katha, Harikatha? Yes? Ball. I spent a week with Bharati Bal, actually. She's an amazing lady. And it's not common for Baal singers to be female. I mean, there are some, but she's really done something and kind of become an international star.
Yakshagana, Parvati,
Yakshagana.
Kathakali, of course, lots and lots,
Anybody else?
Any other types of stories you used to hear in a more performative setting? Anyone even been to any of these kinds of things ever? You have to go live in a village or spend time in temples. I used to go to this temple where it's just like a Brhat Katha, they call it. And very much like the first woman who was telling me, so powerful, these women, man, like the way they tell the stories and enact the drama and the fighting, and it was amazing. So I was just mesmerized. I remember one time my mom was like, it's time to go now, we need to get out of here. And I was just amazed. Well, one musician playing harmonium, one on tabla, and this woman just so engaging. And the other thing, this is the important part. This is why the Pravachaka's job is interesting. You notice they're talking, you telling story of Ramayana, beach mein you're adding, some reference to BJP and Congress and politics and water shortage here and that. I mean, it's a living thing. They're reinventing these stories. They're making them relevant. It's a very beautiful kind of tradition that we have. So I'll just end with one story. These are two great books, by the way, if you want to read. Folk Tales from India, and actually a lot of them are also in this one. A Flowering Tree, this is quite a famous book. This was put together by Stuart Blackburn and Alan Dundas. Dundas was a hugely important scholar of folklore. I mean, in some ways, like, for me, he was like the granddaddy of folklore studies. I had the good fortune of studying with him for just 2 classes I was with him, and just an amazing human being. Did so much for the field, and I wasn't with him in that class, but I remember my friend was in class with him, and literally, he was giving lecture and just fell over in the middle of lecture. That's how he left his world, talking about folklore, his favorite subject. And one of the things these guys did was, they also come from that older structuralist kind of school, so they were looking for like motifs and themes that they would categorize, and they were trying to look for these large things that connected all these stories, whether or not you agree with that kind of methodological approach or not. Fundamentally, what they did, you go into the folklore library at Berkeley, and all the old catalogs were there. So they would send out their grad students, they're all places in the world to collect these stories. They would try to find these myths, they put together these folk motif databases. But basically, there were these cards. Students would write down the story on the card, it would get a number, it would get a story, like what would they call it? Tail type. A tail type. And they would organize them, and you could still see how people had written down all the stories that they had heard. So people had gone and done that. We still need to do that. It would be amazing if we did more of that kind of gathering of these folk stories. So I'll just read one to end, and this is again a meta tale, right? So here's how this one goes. And there's a couple of them like this. A housewife knew a story. She also knew a song. But she kept them to herself. Never told anyone the story, nor did she ever sing the song. Imprisoned within her, the story and the song were feeling choked. They wanted release, wanted to run away. One day, when she was sleeping with her mouth open, the story escaped, fell out of her, and took the shape of a pair of shoes, and sat outside the house. The song also escaped. It took the shape of something like a man's coat, and hung on a peg. The woman's husband came home, looked at the coat and shoes, and asked, "Who is visiting?" "No one," she said. "But whose coat and shoes are these?" "I don't know," she replied. So you get the hint of what's going on. He wasn't satisfied with her answer. He was suspicious. Their conversation was not pleasant. The unpleasantness led to a quarrel. The husband flew off in a great rage, picked up his blanket, and went to the monkey temple to sleep. Lily didn't understand what was happening. She lay down alone that night. She asked the same question over and over again. Whose coat are these? Whose coat is this? Whose shoes are these? Baffled and unhappy, she put out the lamp and went to sleep. All the lamp flames of the town, once they were put out, used to come and go to the monkey god's temple and spend the night there. Gossip. This night, all the lamps of all the houses were represented there, all except one, which came late. The others asked the late comer, "Why are you so late tonight?" At our house, a couple quarreled late in the night. Why did they quarrel? When the husband wasn't home, a pair of shoes came out into the veranda, and a man's coat somehow got onto the bed. The husband asked her whose they were. The wife said she didn't know. They quarreled. Where did the coat and shoes come from? The lady of our house knows a story and a song. She never tells the story, and she never sung the song to anyone. The story of the song got suffocated inside, so they got out and turned into a coat and a pair of shoes. They took revenge. The woman doesn't even know. The husband, lying under his blanket in the temple, heard the lamp's explanation. His suspicions were clear. When he went home, it was dark. He asked his wife about her story and her song, but she said she had forgotten them both. What story? What song? So tell your stories, tell your songs, and like they were saying, every song and story, they need an audience, they need someone to listen. It is a communicative, community-building kind of thing. So please tell the stories, tell the songs, don't let them die. Yes?
Krishna Nagamatla begins with the...
Exactly.
Is it from...
Or okay. From origin, so Kannada story. All right, guys, let's call it a day. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed. Hopefully you'll go out and collect some of these stories on your own and enjoy them. So